Penny, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to speak with you today. I've actually have a lot of friends who've worked with you personally and who've raved about your work and said amazing things, not only about obviously your plethora of knowledge, but also your approach. And when they were telling me about some of the things they worked on with you, I was thinking, that's it. I need to get her on the podcast. I need to be able to, get a few of your nuggets of wisdom. So thank you for being here. Thank you for making the time.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
Amazing.
I think it's wonderful what you're doing, so it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So you are an expert in everything that is, holistic healing, preventative medicine. You're an expert in naturopathy. You incorporate homeopathy, traditional Chinese medicine, if I'm correct with all of that. And although you work with everyone and in all different kinds of connections and conditions and walks of life, you are, amongst others, also an expert in everything that's women's health, which will be the focus of what we're speaking about today. I feel like it's such an important topic, and I think that there's so much opportunity. I think there's so much opportunity in us delving a little bit deeper into all of this. So for us to get started, I would love for you to draw a bit of a picture for us. If we're looking at women's health today in 2025, what are we looking at? What does it look like? What does that snapshot image look like for women's health today?
Look, my philosophy is when females became equal, so there was this feminine equality, and we kind of, in a way, as women, shot ourselves in the foot. Because the problem is with that, you've got women in careers, but you've also got women trying to, bring up kids, run a household, as well as a career. So what we've done is we've just added one more job to our kind of daily routine. And with that comes a lot more stress. So, of course, yes, women are having careers, but that means that they're having children later. Mm-hmm. So our bodies were basically built to have children anywhere between 18 and 24. And what's happened now is, of course, women are having children now at 34, 35, 36. Some are choosing to have their first at 40. And, of course, there's complications that come with that. Because there's egg quality, of course, because you're older. There's stress levels because you're in a career. There's lack of sleep. There's like a whole array of problems that come with that, which complicates the picture, unfortunately. So, of course, women are opting for IVF. Mm-hmm. That's why there's so many IVF clinics around. But, even with IVF, if you get to a certain age, you're going to have poorer egg quality. You'll still have the odd egg coming through that's good quality, but they're far and few between. So, of course, it takes longer to get pregnant. And even with IVF, sometimes you don't get results because the eggs are just not good quality. And the sperm as well. A lot of people forget the men. Men have poor sperm quality. Same thing. From the age of about 40, their sperm can change. So it gets less and the quality gets less. So, of course, you have to also look at that. So I think, in a way, it's good on one respect because women are having careers. But on the other side, it's affected fertility. It's affected family unions. It's affected children's mental state, because now some kids, not here in Thailand particularly, but some kids like in Australia are coming home to empty homes. Mm-hmm. And having to cook for themselves or entertain themselves, So it's affected us in many ways.
I love that you brought up the societal element. I feel like it's something that's not necessarily looked at when we're looking at health. And I always think with every positive, there's a negative, right? Yeah. So you can't have this massive societal change and only look at what benefit will come with it. It's also being aware of what will those repercussions be that are negative, that will span so much more than just the actual career of a woman, for example, right? It spans everything.
Yeah, and that's why women are having much more complications hormonally. You know, they're having polycystic ovarian syndrome, they're having endometriosis. Endometriosis is on the increase because our bodies are not healthy like they used to be hormonally, because your peak is around 21 hormonally. Wow. So, of course, you know, with lifestyle changes, diet, stress, it's contributing to these hormonal problems that are on the increase.
Yeah. So you mentioned PCOS and endometriosis. I'm happy to hear you say, well, happy. Interested to hear you say it's actually on the increase. I feel like I've heard it so much more, but it's also just, is it just because it's more prevalent in my current surroundings than it was before because of maybe age or environment, or is it something that's actually globally increasing? But you say that it is globally increasing.
Globally increasing, yeah, and I think it comes down to diet and lifestyle, because what endometriosis is, the way I look at it, is it's just a thickened lining constantly. So the endometrium gets out of control, but it's an estrogen dominant issue. So you look at, again, obesity rates. Like, the more weight that you carry on your body as a female, the more fat, the more adipose, you're going to store more estrogen, because estrogen likes to store in adipose, in fat. So if you're bigger, you're going to be more inclined to have endometriosis type symptoms. So it's just an imbalance between progesterone and estrogen. And then we've got this whole endocrine balance. So it's an imbalance between your ovaries, your adrenal glands, which is your stress glands, your thyroid gland, you know. So the balance between the three is intricate.
Yeah.
Once one gets out of balance, everything goes out of balance.
Wow.
So I think, you know, lifestyle is a huge contributing factor, and how we cope with stress is a massive factor.
So you mentioned, so we have endometriosis. How is that different from PCOS, or the same?
They can't be the same. They can't exist together.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
my opinion.
Okay.
They cannot exist together because they're opposite things.
Ah, all right.
PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, is where there's too much male hormone. Okay?
Okay.
So the male hormone, being DHEA, is often too high. And what it does, it makes women hairier. So facial hair, nipple hair, belly hair, arm hair. So they get hairier. So DHEA is what gives you that extra testosterone. So women that have PCOS are more inclined to have extra testosterone, which interferes with the cycle. And then PCOS will have long cycle lengths, like 45 days, 50 days, whereas endometriosis is the opposite. It's an estrogen dominance.
Okay.
So as far as I'm concerned, they can usually not exist together.
Interesting.
It'll be the one or the other.
Yeah.
The problem with PCOS, it's you get insulin resistance, which is where you will put weight on quicker because your carbohydrate metabolism is thrown out, glucose metabolism is thrown out, so they'll put weight on quicker, but they'll tend to get less period complications. They won't get pain. They might get mood changes like irritability or anger, because it's more testosterone-based issues. Yeah. They'll get hair thinning on the top, which is like a male balding pattern. But it's like a vicious cycle that goes around with PCOS. It's, the insulin resistance. They crave carbohydrates, they eat carbohydrates and grow fat, which then causes the insulin resistance to get worse. So when you treat in PCOS, you have to treat not just the ovaries, you have to treat the insulin resistance, the high DHEA, which is coming from your adrenal glands, and also the liver.
Okay.
To make it effective.
So how come the liver? Where does that fit in with all of this?
The insulin resistance.
Right.
The liver's involved in glucose.
Mm-hmm.
So what it does, it stores glucose as glycogen, whereas your insulin regulates glucose in your bloodstream and puts it into the cells. So the liver's greatly involved. So you have to look at DHEA and cortisol, the stress hormone. You have to look at the liver for the glucose, and you have to look at the ovaries to regulate the progesterone and the estrogen. Estrogen particularly, because they haven't got enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's the opposite.
So the symptoms that you would be feeling, whether it is PCOS or endometriosis, would be opposite as well.
Yes.
Right? So you're saying that with PCOS, it would be more maybe irregular periods that are more widespread, but not necessarily feeling pain.
No.
Whereas with endometriosis, it's more focused on pain.
Always pain.
Always pain.
There is always pain with endometriosis. Yeah. If you get mid-cycle pain and pain before the period or during the period, you tend to be looking more at endometriosis. But it's severe pain.
Yeah.
It's not just mild PMS pain, it's
Mm-hmm.
severe pain. And pain in the lower back is common with endometriosis. But with PCOS, you don't tend to get that. And even the look is different.
Mm-hmm.
With endometriosis, you have more of that feminine body look.
Yeah.
You know, bigger breasts, bigger hips, more bigger hips, because estrogen likes to store on your hips and your thighs, on your arms and on your breasts. And that's where you'll tend to see them.
Wow.
With
So
PCOS,
can you
no.
look at one of your patients or clients and have a general understanding straight away at what it is that they're dealing with?
Yes. And when you've been practicing as long as I have, I've been practicing nearly 40 years, you kind of learn.
Yeah.
I look at people all the time. The minute they walk in my door, I'm observing them.
Yeah.
They don't know I'm observing them, but I am observing them.
Is there a personality element that you can almost see the way in which they interact?
Yeah, definitely, because I'm a counsellor as well.
Yeah.
So I counsel teenage kids. They're my favourites. I counsel a lot of people. I mix everything together. So I do naturopathy, so that's nutrition and diet and lifestyle. And then I do homeopathy and counselling for the mental state, and supplements and herbs and treatment for anything that's out of balance. So I kind of collectively put it all together.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And with the personality element, is it aligned to some extent with the kind of feminine energy, masculine energy? Is there a correlation with that in terms
Not
of PCOS and endometriosis? In terms of like temperament?
Yeah,
or...
I would say endometriosis, they're much more gentle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because they have that estrogenic aspect.
Yeah.
So they're very sensitive, gentle, emotional, whereas PCOS is male.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more masculine.
Yeah.
So they start off with androgen bodies.
Yeah.
No hips.
Yeah.
No nothing. But they're more aggressive from that respect because they carry more of that testerone.
That's
so
so
you do
interesting.
see a clear picture between the two.
Interesting.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. And so let's go, we spoke a little bit about symptoms, right? So how we're going to notice whether it's more one or the other. What are some of, let's say, the biggest lifestyle factors or nutritional factors that would cause endometriosis versus cause PCOS?
It can happen from puberty.
Yeah.
Commonly it's from puberty. So it really all depends on how the hormones come in at puberty. So, I get lots of teenage girls where they get irregular periods or a period misses. That can be really common from puberty to 16. And then 16, anywhere between 16 and 18, they start to kind of neutralize. And so you become more balanced or one way or the other. So it really all depends on your puberty picture. And endometriosis, I think, starts at puberty.
Oh, interesting. Because I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is it something that we've been more aware of in the past couple of years? Because I feel like there's a lot of new diagnostics that are happening much later in life.
Yes.
but the actual, when it actually began
Yes.
is all the way back then.
All the way back then. I mean, look how many women end up at a doctor for oral contraception, like the pill, to balance their hormones because of pimples on the skin or the chest or the back or painful periods. You know, you start there already.
Yeah.
So with the oral contraceptive pill, which, you know, that's the only solution really, is how to synthetically balance the hormones. It alleviates, but it's not the answer.
Yeah.
Because the minute you take synthetic pills away, then of course the problem comes back. Because it's not addressing anything. And the problem with taking a pill, it down-regulates the receptors on the ovaries for certain hormones because you're on that pill.
Yeah.
So if you're on an estrogenic pill, like Diane or Brenda or the girls' names, Jasmine, you know, or Yaz, or... So, of course, they're going to down-regulate the estrogen receptors because they're estrogenic. Whereas if you go on a progestogenic pill like microgynon or, you know, the progesterogenic ones, they tend to do it with the progesterone. So you've got to wake those up after you've finished. So, you know, it's... And now there's this craze in Australia, because coming from Australia, there's this craze where boys are getting vasectomies. At like 2021, it's become a fad.
Oh my goodness.
Because they don't want children. So, you know, there's also this other side of climate and, you know, the future of the world and the expense of children, the responsibility of children. So, you know, particularly, Gen Zs, I mean, they're like, nah, we don't want this.
Wow.
We don't want all of this. So they're getting vasectomies because they don't trust women. So the tables are fully turned. Like, they don't trust women to take the pills.
Wow.
It's crazy what's happening.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You taught me something. My goodness. Because those are irreversible as well, right?
So not always.
No?
Yeah, they can be reversible.
Okay.
You'd have to be unlucky if it wasn't.
Yeah.
But, you know, the longer you go with a vasectomy, the harder it is to reverse.
Yeah.
So, you know, these guys are going, no, we don't want kids.
Wow. That's wild.
Mm.
And another societal element that's then impacting health,
That's
right?
right.
I mean, they're so
and
intertwined.
fertility rates, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the only problem. You've got people choosing not to have children. I understand that.
Yeah.
Because of the responsibility in this world and because of the financial responsibility.
Wow.
Mm.
So if we're looking then, some of those main, are there any nutritional causes that would relate to PCOS versus endometriosis? And can those nutritional or environmental or lifestyle factors impact it later in life? Or is it always related to, for example, the nutrition, the environment, and lifestyle at puberty?
I think it's your luck,
Okay.
basically. It's how your hormones come in.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, really. It can be aggravated by lifestyle and diet, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they're a direct influence.
Okay.
Maybe as kids, how you were brought up, you
Yeah.
know, with what diet, or were you malnutritioned, or were you on regular antibiotic use, or, yeah, those factors I'm sure come into it, but it all depends on how those hormones come in, which makes you more feminine or more masculine.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
I think it's how they come in.
So you have a predisposition, and then they can be aggravated based on what?
Diet, lifestyle, purely.
Such
what
as
you eat.
Such as what? Like, are there certain elements?
Carbohydrates.
Yeah.
I mean, let's look at carbohydrates. How many people live on carbohydrates? Bread, pasta, rice, sugar, all carbohydrates.
Yeah.
So if you eat carbohydrates with PCOS, you just put more weight on, which aggravates the PCOS.
Mm-hmm.
If you eat too many carbohydrates with endometriosis, you store it as fat, which just makes more estrogen, which makes you more estrogenic. So carbohydrates is something that I'm constantly trying to tell people not to eat. I mean, your diet really should consist of vegetables, fruit, nuts, seeds, legumes, protein, and did I say vegetables and fruit? That's it. That's it. We don't need floured products.
Yeah.
We don't need grains. We really don't. But we eat them anyway.
Yeah. And I think it's always interesting because you have a naturopathic point of view, but then also traditional Chinese medicine. Are those fully aligned in their principles and philosophies? Or are there sometimes some kind of conflicting pieces
I
of
can always
information?
find a connection.
Okay.
Because, I mean, originally I was medicine, but and I used to teach naturopathic students and anatomy and physiology and chemistry and biochemistry, and yeah, I think yes, definitely that.
So I had amenorrhea when I was in my early 20s. So I didn't have a menstrual cycle for 2 years. And at the time, I was fully vegan.
Yeah.
And, I thought that was the best way to work on my health. But then I was also studying traditional Chinese medicine to try understand what to do. And they were saying, no, you need to be having these, more meaty soups. And I was just conflicted. And I was like, how do I make sense of this information?
You see, being a Chinese, I do acupuncture for fertility. That's primarily what I do. But coming from a Chinese philosophy, you've got more the hot foods, cold foods, warming foods. It comes from that respect. So, yes, being a vegan means you would eat a lot of probably raw foods.
It's cold food.
Cold.
Yeah.
It's cold, absolutely. And because it's cold, it has an effect on the kidneys. And in Chinese medicine, the kidneys are menstruation.
Oh, interesting.
So when you do Chinese anatomy and physiology, that is an eye-opener, because doing Western anatomy and physiology that I taught for 20 years, it was crazy to think that the spleen represented digestion, whereas in the Western medicine, spleen represents immunity. So it was like, what? How?
Yeah.
But it's just that philosophy,
Yeah.
the spleen is the chi for the digestion. So, of course, so many people have digestive problems because in Chinese medicine, the stomach is the brain. The stomach is the mind.
Gut-brain connection.
Yeah. So when you say the brain is the second, like the gut is the second brain, that's the connection. But in Chinese, they say if you overthink or you overanalyze, of course, it's going to affect your digestion. Why do you think so many people have digestive problems?
Completely.
I mean, irritable bowel is your number one chronic problem on this earth. And it's because people are in their heads.
Yeah.
Always overthinking, always overanalyzing, always creating scenarios that may never happen.
And living them ahead of time.
Yeah. And the amount of stress that we put our bodies through to do that. Can you imagine the amount of cortisol that you produce, which has an effect on your immune system, your inflammation? So why do you think so many people have poor immune systems and inflamed? But we keep doing it, overthinking, overanalyzing.
So you just spoke about digestion there. What is the impact of digestion, and how is that then related to something like PCOS, endometriosis, or other hormonal imbalances?
Well, I think from that respect, I would say probably digestion and absorption and assimilation.
Of nutrients?
Yes. That I wouldn't see a connection directly from the digestion to progesterone or estrogen, but I would see it from like your level of absorption and assimilation of nutrients that you're getting from your food. which of course then go to your cells and get metabolized into energy, basically. And that's energy for the body. But, you know, in Chinese, the spleen is about your red blood cells as well. So, you know, it's blood quality and quantity. So, of course, when I'm dealing with someone that comes in for fertility, I'm going to want to work on their spleen.
How do you work on their spleen?
I use like spleen points, certain spleen points to enhance the spleen.
Okay.
Qi, so that they...
From acupuncture?
Yes, yes. Which regulates their blood quality, because it's very hard to get pregnant if you're low in blood. That comes back to being a vegan.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I was a vegetarian for 45 years.
Yeah.
I was never a vegan. I tried it briefly and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
The problem with vegetarian or vegan, you're living on carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And that you can't get past that.
Yeah.
And so I myself, as a vegetarian, public spoke in Australia, all over, and was very much pushing vegetarian because of redefining our relationship with animals, purely from that respect. But now looking back, I think to myself, you know, people will disagree with me, I understand, but we do need a certain amount of animal protein in our diet, and that's it. We are humans.
Yeah.
We need, your stomach metabolizes protein only. And it doesn't, and I'm not talking about lentils, and I'm not talking about beans. They're carbohydrates. So the stomach will look at them as carbohydrates and will not touch them. So protein is the only way that the stomach functions, and that's animal protein. You don't need a lot.
Yeah.
You don't need a lot. It doesn't mean to say you have to go out and have kilos.
Yeah.
You just need a small amount every day. Eggs, some fish, they're probably your two main ones, but you need it. It grounds people, and it helps people's weight, and we're not walking around drunk because we're having so many carbohydrates, which just get converted into sugars in your brain. Alcohols.
Wow.
That's why people are addicted to carbohydrates.
Wow. So is there an impact on then having enough animal protein specifically when it comes to hormonal imbalances beyond just the ratio with carbohydrates?
You do need plenty of protein when you've got these hormonal imbalances. You need... Because one, with PCOS, it helps them lose weight, which regulates their insulin resistance, and then, of course, regulates their PCOS. It helps with their PCOS, so they get more regular cycles. So that for sure. If I have a PCOS person coming to my place, the first thing I'll say is, I need you on a high protein, low carbohydrate diet. Because I know that they're going to feel better. They're going to feel much better. They're going to lose weight, and it'll regulate their sugar, their mood will be better, and eventually their PCOS will be better. I need to use things like inositol or licorice. Inositol is an amino acid, so it lowers DHEA.
Is that in a supplement, or?
That's usually in a supplement. Or white peony, which is a herb, which regulates estrogen, thalamic axis, so that brain to the estrogen. And the other one is chromium, which is a mineral. Which stops them craving sugar to begin with, and also regulates their sugar, you know, their glucose recognizing insulin. The insulin resistance is not that they have too much glucose. They're not diabetic. They just represent like diabetics. And it's simply because their glucose tolerance factor doesn't work. So they don't recognize each other. So it stays in the blood, the glucose.
Is it that same way, from what I've heard, is that based on different times of your cycle, let's say right before menstruation, your tolerance to glucose is lower. So you should focus more on low carb during that time especially, right? Is that the same way in that it works with PCOS?
I say to people, if you have cramping, like before your period, or your mood, or cramping on the first day of your period, do me one thing. For 2 weeks prior to your period, lower all your saturated fats like burgers, French fries, those things. Lower all saturated fats. Remove your sugar best you can, and those cramps will disappear.
Wow. But
On their
aren't
own.
there a lot of saturated fat in animal protein?
In meat itself,
Yeah.
no problem.
Okay.
That's not seen as a saturated
Doesn't have the
fat.
same impact.
It's more fat.
Okay.
Fat. So deep fried foods, burgers, that poor quality saturated fat.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we spoke about PCOS, we spoke about, from a nutrition standpoint, you said low carb, high protein diet, right? We're focusing on certain supplements. You mentioned white peony, you mentioned chrome, and you mentioned,
Chromium.
and the last one was
Inositol.
inositol.
Yeah. And white peony.
White peony, yeah.
Usually the formula I give for PCOS, it works really well.
Wow.
Whereas with endometriosis,
Yeah.
I'm looking different.
What is it? What's the formula?
Endometriosis, you're looking at basically regulating their estrogen levels. So you have to work on the liver pathways to excrete estrogen.
Okay,
It's
and how do you do
different.
that?
Well, you have 4 pathways through your liver for breaking down estrogen and progesterone. So it's how we get these unused hormones out of our blood. You can use milk thistle, you can use methacholine, which is an amino acid. There's a variety of herbs. Berberine, I use a lot of berberine in my clinic. I love berberine, which is just a herb barberry. That's it. It's great for candida albicans, so gut problems. It's great for regulating glucose. So I see it as kind of like a natural Ozempic type, without the side effects
Yeah.
of constipation, which often happens. So berberine is great for that. So I have some really favorite herbs that I tend to use.
Okay, so endometriosis, we're focusing on the liver.
Liver.
So liver support. Is there
Yes.
anything else maybe that's not supplement based for liver support that we need to be focusing on?
I usually use something called Vitex agnus castus.
Okay.
Vitex agnus castus is a European herb, and it's used for regulating your luteal hormone, which regulates progesterone. So I will work primarily on that second half of the cycle because that's out of balance compared to the estrogen in the first half of the cycle. This is why they have problems with ovulation.
Okay.
The
What kind of
pain.
problems with ovulation? Oh, the pain. during
Pain
ovulation.
comes at ovulation, or spotting comes at ovulation, because there's a problem between estrogen and that luteal hormone.
Okay.
So how we ovulate
Yeah.
is the luteal hormone spikes,
Yeah.
which then causes the estrogen to come up, which releases the egg. So they don't go through that. So I have to balance that second half of the cycle. So I'll use Vitex. It's
Okay.
a different herb.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything nutritional in terms of diet that somebody with endometriosis should focus on?
Again, you're looking at removing as many carbohydrates as you can. See, I have a very simple diet myself. I eat oatmeal for breakfast, which is the only carb I
Okay, I was
have.
going to say, you have some carbohydrates in the morning. Is there a reason why you have it mostly in the morning?
For energy,
Yeah.
I think till lunchtime. So I have that with my seed mix. So I make a seed mix. So I put all the seeds in, which brings me to menopause, but I put all the seeds in. So flax seed, hemp seed, sunflower seed, pumpkin seed, chia seed, sesame seed, and I mix them all together and I make a mix. And I'll put that on my oatmeal with a banana
Okay.
and almond milk.
Are
That's
you
what I
blending
have.
up the seeds like the flax? Are
No,
you
I
grinding it
have
up? No,
them
you're having it whole. Okay.
Have them whole. I use that for breakfast. Then for lunch, I'll have a massive salad with like eggs or some fish. That's it. And then dinner time, I'll have a very small dinner. I'm 61, so I should intermittent fast at night, not in the morning.
Yeah.
okay? So I'll just have a small meal at night. That's usually what I do. I have a steak once a week when I go out for dinner. That's it.
And what's that small meal in the evening?
Vegetables.
Vegetables, yeah.
Usually. Indian vegetables.
And what about snacking, eating between meals?
I don't.
Yeah. And you don't recommend that to any of your clients either, regardless of what kind of hormonal profile they have?
The problem is with it snacking, if you're a snacker, it means you're not having enough protein.
Mm-hmm.
That's purely it.
Yeah.
Because if you're deficient in protein, you have a bottomless pit.
Yeah.
Literally, their hunger is all the time.
Yeah.
Because carbohydrates carry you for 2 hours only.
Yeah.
Then they're empty, stomach's empty.
Yeah.
Then it goes, I'm hungry again.
Yeah.
So people that snack and are always needing to eat too many carbohydrates, not enough protein to ground you at all. It doesn't stabilize the blood sugar. The blood sugar just goes up and down all day.
It's a good gauge, though, isn't it? It's a gauge of, wait a second, if I just had, a big breakfast or a big meal and I am hungry an hour or two later, it's less about, the hunger isn't the problem, it's thinking about how am I going to recompose that meal. I remember at one point for breakfast, I was having also porridge, but just oats with banana apple, like no fat mixed in it, no protein mixed in it. I was training a lot of running, so I thought, this is great, high carb, and I would be starving an hour later, and I remember thinking, this is great, my metabolism is so fast, I'm hungry right after, and then after, I was working with a nutritionist and realized, actually, no, I need to be getting at least some fat and protein first thing in the morning as well.
Because it naturally makes your stomach heavy, full.
Mm-hmm.
So, protein and fat weigh the stomach down. Carbohydrates doesn't at all. So, if you have protein and fat, good fats, it'll last until lunchtime. So then you're not interrupting the digestive system. You shouldn't eat really every 4 hours. Now, as a naturopath back in the 80s, I was always taught every 2 hours, keep your metabolism. It's not right. It really isn't. Because you need to make sure that the stomach's empty before you add more.
You need a break as well.
Yeah, because the minute you start chewing, the stomach stops its digestion because here is where it needs to focus. So if you eat every 4 hours, say, so you could have a snack in the afternoon if you needed it, every 4 hours you won't interfere with your digestive system and there won't be any fermentation causing you to have burping or gas. That's the thing.
Interesting. So we looked at nutrition. Is there anything else you'd add when it comes to women's health, when it comes to nutrition? Whether that's, endometriosis, PCOS, or even any other hormonal imbalance. Is there anything else you would add there as a recommendation?
I'm just a big lover of these are the 4 that I don't like. The 4 foods that I'll tend to look at: dairy, always, gluten, sugar, refined sugars, and just general carbohydrates, grains. Personally, I don't think we need much of those in our diet. I really believe if you have nuts, seeds, legumes, vegetables, and fruit, it gives you enough carbohydrates to function. If you're a marathon runner, okay, you could have more, because of that reason. This is just the general day-to-day person. That's really all you need. And if you stayed on that, your health will be a lot better, mentally and physically.
Thoughts on alcohol and caffeine?
Caffeine, if you really want, 1 cup a day. In the morning, caffeine stays in your system for 11 hours. So if you're having issues with sleep, do not drink caffeine later than probably 9 or 10 a.m. because it's going to upset your sleep. And when you commonly see people with cancer, the people that I see with cancer, they all have a similarity. They're all perfectionists, they all are constipated, and they all don't sleep.
Wow.
And then those 3 things accumulate, and over years, all of a sudden something comes. And it's common. Like, it's amazing how common that perfectionism and those two symptoms happen with
Interesting.
people with cancer.
I always try to find the correlation between, let's say, a perfectionist mindset with how that might cause, I guess, constipation because you're not allowing your digestive system.
Can't let go.
Yeah. Oh, can't let go. I love that. That's,
Can't let
yeah,
go.
wow.
Cannot let go.
Yeah.
So they're in bed at night thinking. You know, can't switch off their mind. You cannot live years and years like that because it'll catch up on you. You know. Same with menopause. Like menopause, I just want to briefly touch on menopause because I have a lot of women coming to me. Their period becomes irregular, and they think they're perimenopausal, and they're 42, and I'm like, no, you're not perimenopausal. It's just for some reason your periods have become a bit off.
Yeah.
So what we've got to do is find out why that is, and then just regulate it, and you'll be fine.
Often, why is that?
It can be stress, it can be weight loss, it can be a shock, it can be like traveling all the time. You know, my first clinic that I opened in Sydney was air hostesses for fertility because they were all infertile.
Wow.
International flights.
Yeah, I mean, because their circadian rhythm is completely
stuffed up, completely. So I want to say, like, you know, the thing is with this whole menopause thing, you've got perimenopause and postmenopause.
How long does perimenopause go on for?
The whole thing will go from 45 to about 70.
Okay. It's a big chunk of your life.
Absolutely. And the reason being is like from 45 to 55, anywhere between 45 to 55, you can have menopause. So perimenopause usually starts around 46 to 47, where you'll get period changes. One heavy, one light. And then as you get closer to menopause, you start missing periods. So every 2 months they might come, then you might have a heavy one, and then it's a light one. And the changes are just like that. And the menopause is just the period where it's a short period. It's where the menses stop, the periods just stop. Then you've got postmenopause. So women think the minute the periods stop, everything's done. I'm like, no.
Too quick.
Yeah. I said, you've got
That would be too easy.
postmenopause.
That would be too easy,
Yes. Said, you know, postmenopause, you've got to watch your
Muscle
hormones are imbalanced because you don't want cancers. You want to make sure you're sleeping well. You want to make sure your stress levels are good. Stress is the biggest factor for perimenopause and postmenopause. Biggest factor. Because the problem is when your estrogen levels drop at menopause, when they get from 100% to say 18%, then of course the periods will stop.
Yeah.
You know? But you have to be careful because cortisol levels go up. As the estrogen drops, the cortisol levels go up. And the thyroid can be affected because of the change in estrogen.
Wow.
So we have to be really careful.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be stressing yourself out, producing more cortisol when you already have a lot.
How do you deal with that then? I mean, I guess it's just mental exercises.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's basically finding something that manages your stress levels, because that's why people get belly fat. You know, the amount of women that I get in and says, I have this awful fat on my tummy since menopause. Well, that's a stress belly. You know, you're stressing out, which is adding to more cortisol, or you're drinking too much coffee, or you're having too much alcohol, and it just adds to the cortisol and gives you this belly fat.
Yeah.
So it's such a common occurrence. So what I do for women, I say, if you're at perimenopause now, you need to do 2 things. You need to, 1, make sure your cortisol levels are good. So the first thing I do is work on their adrenals.
Okay.
Because I want those to be healthy for when they get to menopause.
How do you work on their adrenals?
Adaptogens.
Okay.
Adaptogens are the best.
Ashwagandha.
Ashwagandha, rhodiola, Siberian ginseng, Korean ginseng, Romania, oat seed. I mean, there's so many. There's so many herbs you can take. You need to get your adrenals sorted out. And if you've got anything imbalance, like mood, like you're depressed or you're anxious or you're not sleeping or you're not coping, if you don't get those things sorted out, they just get exacerbated at menopause. They're not new symptoms.
Yeah. So you really want to think about it ahead of time.
Yeah.
When do you want to think about it? You're going to say as early as possible.
46, 45, you want to start thinking about this, because I'm telling you, if these things are in balance, you'll breeze through menopause. It's just the hot flushes, bit of hot flushes, maybe a little bit of mood, but then you'll breeze through it. But if these things are not sorted out, they will just drag through, and they'll just be exacerbated. And people think they're new symptoms, but they've been there.
That's the challenge, right? It's the symptoms that have been building up in the past that you didn't necessarily notice or pay attention to. And then they hit, and it's kind of like, well, what do I do now?
That's it.
You know, I'm in it. So I guess supplementation is your main focus, or do you also mostly focus on acupuncture? Are there other modalities that you utilize as well?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I'd always do a combination. I never do one thing.
Yeah.
Always. I like to, the first thing I want to know is what's going on mentally.
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And the other is, tell me about your home life. You know, I'm a big thing of what's your relationship like.
Yeah.
So I'm always going to ask, hey, how are you feeling right now? Okay. And then, how's your relationship with your husband or your partner? How's your relationship with the kids? I want to know those external factors that may be contributing, and then I'll go on to other things. But I always start mentally.
Have you found a pattern of, let's say, home life situations or commonalities with then health or hormonal impacts?
Yeah.
Such as?
Do you know, I think nowadays we have more hormonal problems because helicopter parenting.
Yeah.
Helicopter parenting. The parenting situation, which I could go on and talk about for a very long time, it needs to change. Desperately.
Yeah.
Needs to change. The parenting is confused. Everyone's confused.
Yeah.
People are confused. Parents are confused. Everyone's confused. But we need to get some realistic parenting skills in order, because the way it is now, it's not working.
Yeah.
It's not working. We cannot be best friends with our kids. And if you're looking to be a best friend with your child, that's a recipe for disaster.
Get a dog.
Yeah, absolutely. You are a parent, and you need to act like a parent, and you need to be the best influence you can for your children.
Yeah.
That's it. So if you don't want your children using mobile phones, don't you use a mobile phone. And so I could talk about parenting for, like, it's the one thing that angers me.
Yeah. So what's the impact of that? Is it once again kind of go through stress related, or are there other elements or other I don't know,
They're stressed
areas? Yeah.
because they're helicoptering their kids. So what they're trying to do is protect their kids from experiencing any hurt or pain they may have experienced as a kid. You can't do that.
Yeah.
It's their life. They have to experience these things. So the stress on the child and the parent to do this is huge.
What's the cause of the helicopter parenthood in the first place?
I think it's this whole teaching of mindfulness.
Yeah.
And mindfulness parenting, and you can't say no.
Yeah.
And if you do say no, you've got to explain. Like, do you know what? You start explaining to your child why. They hear the first 3 words and they're gone.
Completely.
So you don't need to be over-explaining to children why that is not appropriate.
Yeah.
You know? You need to start being a parent. And that's it. And I see it all the time.
And then what repercussions do you see that demonstrate within health?
Well, with the kids,
Yeah.
there's a problem because they lose respect for the parent because the parent's trying to be the child, like trying to be their best friend. And so they lose the respect for the parents. And then, of course, with technology and trying to control technology is massive here. It's the biggest stress problem here that I'm faced with parents and kids. Kids come in and go, I don't get enough time on technology because they're addicted completely. And parents go, you know, how can I get my child to not be on technology so much? I mean, it's a big factor.
Yeah.
The problem with menopause is when our mothers went through menopause, we were already gone. We'd left home.
Because of the age now,
That
the
comes
age
back
difference.
to the, when you want to have
Yeah.
kids. So you're going through this menopause period, which is really stressful, and you've got teenage kids at home,
Wow.
you know? And so there's that factor on top, which basically colours the way we experience menopause. Western women get worse at menopause. Not so much here in Thailand, because you've got nannies and helpers. Eastern women they go through menopause a lot easier. I think because of the support.
I was going to say they have maybe more family support.
Yeah. Whereas Western women have less support. They don't have family support. And so they'll tend to have a full-time job and they're trying to manage the teenage kids at home and their menopause,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, wow.
So
So, I mean, it's interesting, right? It all kind of comes down to the societal shift, which for the greater good, and then it's how are we managing the repercussions of all of
That's
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
that's
wild.
the problem.
So, is there anything that you think is a bit underrated that we're not paying attention to that would benefit female health, whether it be within, you know, any kind of hormonal concerns, but then also, let's say, for your average day woman, anything that's completely underrated that we've kind of not getting enough airtime?
Self-management really is how to manage yourself. You know, I believe that humans have gotten so much further away from self-love that it doesn't get enough airtime. How to manage yourself, how to really truly love yourself and be comfortable in your own skin, and teaching kids how to do that too. And not necessarily think because I don't fit in at school, or maybe changing my sex may actually help that. That's also not a solution. And so, you know, parenting, if I have parents that come in and they want to, I don't know, buy their child a boob binder or something, I'm anti, no, absolute no. You cannot do that until a child gets to the age where they can make that their own decision, because I just see it as them completely confused.
For sure.
But, you know, that's the era today. We had, in my era, we had, you know, you were a mod or a punk rocker or a, you know, romantic, or, you know, that was our fashion. So I think when we were maybe felt we didn't fit in, or we didn't have friends, or we could dress up as a punk rocker and, you know, that would give us a mask.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same here. But I get really tired of this whole woke stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, there's also, you see the repercussions every day, right?
Yes.
You deal with the repercussions every day.
Yeah,
so I think that it's, it's important to say it as it is.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm not judging.
Yeah.
I'm really not judging. I just think it's got out of control.
I think ultimately everyone's trying to do the best that they can with what they have, you know, and it's always how it's been, it's always how it'll be. It's just that, how are we managing it? And as you say, when children are confused, I mean,
exactly what you said about changing. I mean, I remember me as a child, great, this week I want to dress as this is my favorite color, I'm a princess, great, the next day, no, now I'm a gangster, I have my backwards cap and my chains.
That's
like,
right.
that's fine, I was changing my identity because you're playing around with your identity because you don't know who you are.
Yes, but that's with clothes.
Yeah.
This is with
Yeah.
changing your body.
Yeah.
And I do not believe in that until you're 18, that you can make that decision yourself. Because most of the time, by the time they get to 18, they don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So be patient, parents. Hold on. You are a parent. You are allowed to say no.
Yeah.
That's it. And that isn't wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And you are allowed to say that. You are the person that they follow.
Yeah. And I think the thing you said about respect earlier is important. And it's funny because you mentioned the self-love, right? In a way, it comes from I'd say almost a lack of self-love, because a parent is looking for the child to make themselves feel loved and appreciated, so they don't want the child to dislike them, which a child will dislike their parent at some point.
Of course, you can't be offended by what your child does or say. If you're offended by what your child does or say, you really need to look at yourself.
Yeah.
They're your child.
Yeah.
Of course they're going to dislike you.
Yeah.
Of course they're going to hate you and say awful things. But it's not something that you need to be offended by.
Yeah.
You need to rise above that and be a parent.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And see it for what it is.
So what do we need to look at when you're mentioning, we need this kind of self-love element? What are some of the things that we can already start thinking about in order to put that in place?
Get out of fear. Because the problem is humans are fearful.
Yeah.
And while ever we're fearful, we're always going to be anxious and control the environment, but we're never going to love ourselves.
Yeah.
You can't love yourself and be afraid. So it's getting out of that fear. What are you afraid of? And again, most of the time it's scenarios. It's what if?
Yeah.
What if,
Always.
what if, what if, And it's a matter of be in the present.
Mm-hmm.
Be in the now. Not in the past or in the future. Be in the now.
Yeah.
And enjoy the now. And do what you can in the now.
Mm-hmm.
And things will work out. We have to trust.
Mm-hmm.
And
the
not
trust
control.
element. Trust element is a big thing.
No, very much.
Yeah.
And when you have COVID and all of this stuff, it's like, I see the impact from locking people up at COVID.
Completely.
It was the worst social experiment that ever happened, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
And not only that, it destroyed our younger generation. And so now we're seeing the repercussions of that. You need to really think things through before you start doing that with humans.
100%.
Because it's caused a lot of mental instability, not just in kids, but in adults, worldwide. Worldwide. And has it helped? Has it taught us anything? No, it hasn't.
Yeah.
It's just taught us how to be even greedier to make up for the loss of COVID. And so, I believe that humans are the disease of this earth.
Mm-hmm.
I think greed in humans is the disease.
That's a hard one.
Unfortunately, yeah. Because we believe money removes the fear. See, it keeps us controlled. It will, ward off any illness. No, money doesn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to look at yourself and remove the fear and the anxiety rather than cling on to money thinking it's going to remove all of those fears.
And removing the fear and the anxiety happens in the mind? Like you think that we can do that with our mind?
You'd have to keep telling yourself, it's like you're your own teacher. It's like retraining yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Be your teacher.
Yeah.
When people come to me for counselling, I give them strategies to use, but I give them things to say to themselves every day, If you are a person that likes things to be ordered or clean, every time you do that, there's a reason you do that.
Yeah.
So say to yourself, why am I needing to do this right now? What is it that is making me feel stressed to have to do that? And do that all the time, and it will change the patterns. But you have to be your own teacher.
I think you have to be proactive, and like what you said with the parenting, you have to be your own parent, and sometimes you have to enforce that discipline to yourself.
Yes.
Which is sometimes a bit contrary to, I think, a more modern day approach of you have to wrap yourself in cotton wool, and I feel like that doesn't help in the end of things.
Not at all. It just, I mean, if something happened, our younger generation, particularly Gen Zs, wouldn't have the ability to survive.
Yeah.
We've taken all of that away from them. We've removed, robbed them of all these survival skills.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so if something happened, they just wouldn't survive because they wouldn't have the ability to. So they would become grossly anxious and end up in a psychologist or counsellor's room.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Which
don't
they're
have
already
that stuff.
anxious in
Absolutely.
just an everyday situation.
Yeah. Yeah. But we're kind of fueling it almost,
Completely.
you see, by nurturing that.
Yeah.
You know, nurture it. Come and see the school counsellor. Come and see, nurturing all of that. So we need to start teaching people how to be stoic, how to get through situations like that themselves, not rely on someone to talk to, I'm not coping, I mean, I have people that ask me for medical letters so that kids can have a separate classroom with a teacher because they can't cope. I said, well, imagine what all the other kids are feeling.
Yeah. And also, what solution does that pose for the rest of their life? They won't
it.
stay in an empty classroom forever, right?
Yeah. We're not allowed to lose. When you think about it, schools, if you won a race, it was like, good on you.
Yeah.
You get the trophy.
Yeah.
Now they all get the trophy.
Yeah.
So what does it teach us? It doesn't teach us anything. It teaches that we have to put as little effort in as possible. Even if I don't win, who cares? I get a trophy at the end of it.
Yeah.
So change things. We've got to drastically change.
Yeah.
Drastically. I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, I mean, I love the turn that the conversation took. I completely agree with you. We will have to start wrapping things up a little bit. If you were to look at women, right? Women in all different times of their life, right? You can break it up if you need to. What is certain pieces of advice, maybe 3 pieces of advice that you would give that are kind of a parting message, whether that is more in terms of how they're dealing with their mental health, whether it's, back to the nutrition side of things, 3 pieces of advice in general that you think are relevant for women, that you would be in parting words.
Take time to exercise regularly. Take time to sleep.
Yeah.
Because you need sleep.
How much sleep do we need?
8 hours, and you should be going to sleep at the same time every night.
Yeah.
So you keep a routine, and stress less. That's it. But in diet, in diet, low carbohydrates, water.
Yeah.
Drink water.
But high quality water.
Yeah, but people don't drink water.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
They just don't. So drink water, Again, as I said, exercise, eat regularly, and be happy, be happy within yourself. A car or a house or another item of clothing doesn't do it. It comes from within.
Yeah.
So be comfortable with who you are as a person. That's it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
everything, a huge amount of information that you shared. Very, very grateful for all of that, and I can't wait for everyone
Thank
to
you
listen
for
to it.
inviting me to come. It's lovely. Very nice.
Thank you.
Happy to do more.
Amazing. Well, we'll have to get you on again.
Yes, definitely, about something else.
Exactly. Thank you.